This conference will now be recorded.
All right, ready, Brian? You want to get going?
Yep, we're all set.
All right, welcome everyone to the MPO today of the Montachusett Metropolitan Planning Organization. We will start with a roll call. Brian, who's doing the roll call?
I can do that.
All right, you want to
We
go ahead?
have Steve Wolfel representing Mass DOT Secretary and CEO Monica Tibbetts Nutt.
I'm here.
Ann Sullivan representing DOT Highway Division Administrator Jonathan Gulliver.
I'm here.
Mark Pamarini, Leominster.
Here.
George Kahali, Mart.
Present.
Glenn Eaton, MRPC.
Here.
Rosemary Meissner, Subregion 2.
Here.
And Tim Kilhart, Subregion 3.
Here.
Okay, so those are all the signatories.
All right. With that, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is public comment. Any members of the public like to address the MPO today? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 3, which are the minutes of December 20th, 2023. Can I get a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve it.
I'll second. Ann Sullivan.
All right, any changes or comments on the minutes? All right, seeing none, Brian, you want to read the roll, please?
Steve Wolfel, Mass
Yeah.
DOT.
Yep.
Ann Sullivan, Mass DOT Highway.
Yes.
Mark Pamarini, Leominster.
Yes.
Glenn Eaton, MRPC.
Yes.
George Kahali, Mart.
Yes.
Rosemary Meissner, Subregion 2.
Yes.
Tim Kilhart, Subregion 3.
Yes.
All right, thank you for that. We'll move on to agenda item 4, which is an update, a standing item update on the statewide long-range transportation plan. Chris, I believe we have no update, correct?
Correct.
All right.
Nothing at this time.
All right, thank you, Chris. So now we're on to agenda item 5, which is a voting item on the federal fiscal year 2024 to 2028 tip. Brian, take it away.
Okay, so we have 2 amendments today to discuss, and ultimately we're looking for a motion to release for a 21-day public comment period. This is to the current tip in federal fiscal year 2024. If we release for public comment, we plan on a comment period from Friday, January 26th through Thursday, February 16th. And that'll give us a chance to discuss it with the JTC at that meeting at February 14th. So the summaries were provided in the handouts. The first amendment, and I guess we could handle this 2 ways, Steve. I could discuss both amendments and maybe a motion for both. Or if there's an issue, we want to separate them, we could take 2 motions to
Why don't we
release.
do motions, Chris, just make it clean?
Sorry, what was that?
Why don't you do 2 separate ones just to make it clean?
Sure, okay. So the first one we're calling amendment number 3. This is to the highway side, involves 2 projects. The first being in Athol, project 608-723, intersection improvements at Crescent Street and Chestnut Hill Avenue. Basically, this was originally funded with coronavirus response and relief supplemental appropriation funds, or CRRSAA funds. That's how it's listed in the current tip. However, based on a ruling to avert a congressional shutdown in June, all these funds had to be obligated immediately. So we had to find another funding source. In this case, we have it switched over to STBG, or Service Transportation Block Grant funds. That's all that changes. It's just the funding source in this case. The other project involved in this highway amendment is project number 612110, which is in Fitchburg and Ashby, resurfacing and related work on Route 31. And due to project readiness concerns, Mass DOT is suggesting moving this back 1 year until fiscal year 25. So remain the same, but move back 1 year. This is amendment number 3.
All right. Can I get a motion a second on amendment number 3, and then I'll open up to questions?
So moved, Brian Croto.
Second, Ann Sullivan.
All right, any questions for Brian? All right, seeing none, Brian, you want to read the roll for this, please?
Steve Wolfo, Mass DOT.
Yes.
Ann Sullivan, Mass DOT Highway.
Yes.
Mark Pammarini, Leominster.
Yes.
Glenn Eaton, MRPC.
Yes.
George Kahali, Mart.
Yes.
Brian Croto, Subregion 1.
Yes.
Rosemary Meisner, Subregion 2.
Yes.
And Tim Kilhart, Subregion 3.
Yes.
Okay, that passes. Thank you.
All right, so you can move on to Amendment 4, right, Brian?
Yep, this is what we're calling amendment number 4. Again, this is to federal fiscal year 2024 on the current tip. This is on the transit side. This is pretty simple. It's just the addition of 2 community transit grant awards that weren't previously listed in the tip. So there's a need to include them. So we're amending them in.
All right, can I get a motion second to send this out for public comment?
So
I make
moved.
a motion to send it out as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second, Ann Sullivan.
All right, any questions for Brian or George? All right, seeing none. Brian, you want to read the roll?
Steve Wolfo, Mass DOT.
Yes.
Ann Sullivan, Mass Dot Highway.
Yes.
Mark Pammarini, Leominster.
Yes.
Glenn Eaton, MRPC.
Yes.
George Kahali, Mart.
Yes.
Brian Croto, Subregion 1.
Yes.
Rosemary Meisner, Subregion 2.
Yes.
And Tim Kilhart, Subregion 3.
Yes.
All right,
Okay, that
thank you.
passes well.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Brian. So now we'll move on to agenda item. Actually, what's the next agenda item? Bring them. Yeah, there we go. Agenda item 6 is review of the 2024-2028 highway listing. I assume this is you, Brian, too?
Yes, and we discussed this briefly in December. Basically, we're starting our development process of the 2025 through 29 tip. And of course, we discussed the transportation improvement program often here with all the amendments, but basically just as a reminder to everyone, the tip is a listing of all the highway and transit projects in our region, which are federally funded. So it's up to the MPO to endorse the tip, and we'll have a lot of discussions over the coming months, especially in February and March. So basically, it covers 5 federal fiscal years. There's transit and highway projects. The transit projects are prioritized by MART, the Transit Authority. So we'll review some of those projects in a few months, likely in March. The highway side, basically there are 2 ways the highway projects are prioritized. The first is what we refer to as the statewide listing. And these are prioritized by DOT, and we'll review those when they become available, likely in February and March as well. The other way highway side projects are prioritized is what's called the target section. And this is where we as an MPO have discretion on placement. So majority of our discussion takes place within this target section of the projects that are included in it. So in the handouts, I think we had this at the December meeting. This is our tentative schedule of development. And this is what we've used the last few years, and we're right at the beginning stages here. We should be on schedule. It's worked well in the past. In the next few weeks, basically, we're in the process of gathering information on these target section projects in particular. In February, we'll have a more detailed review on these projects. We'll talk about our evaluation criteria a little bit more in detail, and we'll discuss some issues that may have arisen over the year since we last talked in detail about these projects. Again, we want to be on schedule to discuss possible scenarios for project placement in March and draft in April, ultimately an endorsement in May. So this is just to give you an indication of what we'll be discussing at the MPO and the JTC meetings as well over the next few months. What I also have is sort of, this is what our starting off point is every year. We take the current list. So the current tip is the 2024 through 28 tip. And the idea is ideally to move all of these projects up and drop fiscal year 24, add 2029 to this new version, and everything would be clean. That's never the case. There's always issues that arrive. There's project readiness is one of our main concerns. So the updates that we'll be getting from DOT and project consultants in the next few months, we'll discuss in detail that. We'll bring some of that information to you in February and March as well. But anyways, this is really where we start off, is reviewing the highway projects as we have them listed now. So this is all the highway projects in the current tip. The yellow highlighted projects are the target section projects, again, where we have most discretion over. And the white ones are the statewide priorities. I won't go over the statewide priorities in detail right now. We'll review that list in a few months. The target projects as they are right now, though, however, are in federal fiscal year 24, we have Leominster reconstruction rehab of Route 12. This is listed 3 times here on this sheet. That's because we have 3 different funding sources. It's just one project. It's also our most extensive project. It's very involved. It's the high cost. Actually, the cost is over any target allotment funds in any given fiscal year. So that allows us to schedule it over 2 years, what's called advanced construct. So this is AC'd over 2024 and the second half in 2025, along with in 2025 Ashburnham Road rehab on Route 101. In 2026, currently we have Templeton reconstruction of 68 from Route 202 to the Phillipston Town Line, along with Harvard resurfacing and box widening on Air Road. This Harvard project is advanced constructed into 2027, along with Athol intersection improvements at Route 2A and Brookside Road, and Clinton reconstruction of Route 62. Finally, the final year of the current tip, 2028, we have 2 projects, Fitchburg reconstruction of John Fitch Highway and Sterling intersection improvements at 140 and 62. So this is where we're starting off. We're dropping fiscal year 2024, adding federal fiscal year 2029. So we'll be looking at bringing some projects forward from what we call the appendix section. These are all the projects that are eligible for target funds and funding in the tip, but they have not been assigned a year. So we'll have details about those projects as well next month. And basically what we're telling our communities now is to stay on top of your projects and your design consultants and make sure things are moving forward. And typically the biggest effect that we see on these projects in delays is delays in design. So we really have to make sure that they're ready to go in the year that we place it. It's very important, especially in the first few years. For example, if we placed a project in federal fiscal year 2025, wasn't ready to go out for advertisement in 25, our region could possibly lose out on those funds. Basically, it would just revert back to statewide funds to be spent on their priorities. So we really have to be careful about project placement and be certain that projects are ready to go in the year that we place them. It's also fiscally constrained document. We'll be receiving our target allotments. We'll discuss those in February, and we'll have to make sure that we're within budget as well. So this is what we'll be discussing over the next few months. Actually, next month at the February meeting, we'll have a presentation on a project that's currently in the appendix. Winchendon Blair Square, the project consultant will come to a short presentation. We invite other communities to present their projects as well, especially if it's a new project we haven't discussed yet. It's always helpful, and that it's a standing invitation throughout the year. But of course, this is the most consequential time of year for tip development. So the more information, the better. We'll have a lot of information for this group in the next few months. So that's just another update. We'll really dig into it in February. So if there's any questions about your project or about the process, please reach out to me and I'll try to answer them as best as I can.
All right, anyone have any questions for Brian? All right, thank you, Brian. Why don't we move to agenda item 7, which is an update on the 2025, fiscal year 2025 Unified Planning Work Program. Sherry, I assume you're here.
Sherry's not here, so I can take this one too.
All right, go, Brian.
Again, I believe we mentioned this last month, and I think the notice actually just went out today. We're soliciting projects for our Unified Planning Work Program. So again, we're following a similar schedule to the tip. We want to be able to send a draft out for a public comment period in April, and this group endorse in May if everything goes smoothly. We'll have some additional discussions about specific projects in the coming month as well. So this document basically contains all the tasks that we as a staff of the MPO do throughout the year. And it's federal fiscal year 2025, so it's the program year that starts October 1st, 2024, goes through September 30th of 25. So typically we send out a solicitation memo to communities, which we did this morning. We're looking at project suggestions. We've done a number of different projects in the past, intersection studies, corridor analysis. Basically, if there's an issue in your community that you think that we can look at, we may be able to develop a task for it and look at it through our Unified Planning Work Program. This is our contract with DOT that allows us to do this type of project. So it's free to the town. We ask just a commitment from the town, a letter of support from a public body, and just to state your need and the reason for wanting us to do a study or look at an issue. So this information is out there. Sherry Bean is the lead on the UPWP. You can contact her or myself and we can talk about your project anytime. We're asking for project requests by February 9th. So
All right.
That's all I have for this update.
All right, any questions for Brian? All right, thank you, Brian. We'll move on to agenda item 8, which is a vote. It's on the PM1 safety performance measures, which I believe Chris and George are going to present together. So you guys should take it away.
Yep, I'll kick this one off. Thanks, Mr. Chair. And hopefully everyone can hear me okay. If not, Brian, just let me know. So I'm Chris Clem. I'm MassDOT's liaison to the Montachusett Regional Planning Commission, and I will summarize the performance measure handout on the screen, going into some background on how and why MassDOT developed the particular 2024 safety targets. And this handout's also available in the meeting materials, so if you'd like to read it at full length, you can do so as well. So in 2016, FHWA passed a rule establishing 3 performance measures that state DOTs and MPOs must track. And the first of those measures, PM1, focuses on improving safety. And we're required to report this measure annually and submit a 5-year rolling average targets for total fatalities, fatality rate, total serious injuries, serious injury rate, and total non-motorized serious injuries and fatalities. And there's no rate for that final measure because VE data is required to calculate this, and non-motorized individuals aren't traveling in vehicles. So the calendar year 2024 PM1 targeting process began in April, and something new this year is that MassDOT also developed a 2026 target for each safety measure. And this was done to have an out-year target and be consistent with what our Highway Safety Office was looking at, as well as the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. For reporting purposes, we are only required to adopt the 2024 target. The 26 target is really just for consistency with these other agencies I mentioned, and it lets us look a little bit further out into the future to see what the 2026 numbers might look like if we were able to maintain the targets that we set in 2024. Something that was new last year, per new guidance in the bipartisan infrastructure law, is that we are required to set constant or improved targets. So we can't have any in fatalities or serious injuries or any of those rates. It needs to be constant or improved, getting better. And although data at time target setting began in April showed that the state was trending towards some better levels, to more pre-COVID type numbers, that data wasn't complete and therefore was not included in the target setting process. And so MassDOT excludes the 5-year average for 2019 to 2023, because we don't want this to be potentially misleading once that 23 data is finalized. And starting with fatalities, MassDOT projects 23 and 2024 numbers to be in line with our pre-COVID data. And when looking at year-over-year changes, so comparing 2021 and 2022 to 23 and 24, this results in a 2% decrease in fatalities, annual fatalities. And although the year-over-year changes aren't displayed in this graph, they're baked into the 5-year averages. So we expect a strong decrease in year-over-year, but it does typically take multiple years of decreases for improvements to truly be recognized and captured in the 5-year average. Again, despite a strong year-over-year improvement that we anticipate, the 5-year average sees a much more modest reduction from 2018 to 2022 to 2020 to 2024, going from 378 to 377. And if this trend were to continue, that 26 average would be 362. Moving on to the fatality rate, which is captured. Oh, you can stay on that graph, Brian. Sorry. The fatality graph. Sorry. Thank you for controlling your screen. I appreciate it. So the rate here, which is seen in orange, that represents 5-year average fatalities divided by 5-year average vehicle miles traveled, or VMD. And mass projections suggest VMT will increase this year and likely exceed pre-pandemic levels. So consequently, we expect the fatality rate to decrease, moving from 0.62 to 0.61 fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. And if this trend continues, the rate will further decrease to 0.54 for 2022 to 2026. We can move on to the next graph now. Thanks, Brian. So this total serious injuries, this target setting process began with a trend line projection based on the best available data at the time of target setting in April. And as noted in this handout, the 2021 and 2022 serious injury data were finalized at the time of target setting. So it is possible that when we come to bring these performance measures here next year, that this looks slightly different. So the data at the time in April did suggest that injuries were trending down, but because there was only a small snapshot of the year so far, we did not include that when setting this target. Instead, MassDOT projected 23 and 24 numbers to be in line with pre-COVID data, similar to fatalities, which resulted in a year-over-year decrease of 10% when we compared the difference between 21 and 22 to 23 and 24. Unfortunately, the 5-year average does remain the same in this case at 2,708 total serious injuries. If this trend were to continue, the 2026 average will further decrease to 2,603 serious injuries. Looking at the serious injury rate, that's again captured on your screen in orange, we followed the same methodology to derive fatality rate. So we took the 5-year average serious injuries divided by 100 million vehicle miles traveled, and that went from an average of 4.42 serious injuries to 4.36 serious injuries. And if we continue this trend out to 2026, that rate would decrease to 3.91. Moving on to total combined non-motorized injuries and fatalities. The pandemic had a really significant impact on this particular category. We saw a drop to start the pandemic, and then an increase, and then a real spike in 2022. But based on MassDOT's emphasis to vulnerable road users, the agency does project that 23 and 24 numbers will match low from 2020. And this will bring us to a 5-year average decreasing from 480, the average of 2018 to 2022, to 445 for 2024. And if this trend were to continue, average in 2026 would be 435. I realize that's a lot of information. I hope I didn't talk too fast or anything, but I do want to read again that these projections relied on the data that was available at the time of target setting, April, And we do expect that when the next target setting process begins later this spring, we'll have a much more complete picture of how the state did in 2023. And I also want to emphasize that the state targets presented here are not goals, but rather realistic targets considering events of the last 3 years, and MassDOT's overarching goal remains 0 fatalities and serious injuries. And that is all I got. Thanks, Brian.
All right. Anyone have any questions of Chris before I ask for a motion in a second? So Brian, I assume staff is suggesting following the statewide target.
Yes, that's what we've done in the past, and that's what we suggest. It's best to have continuity in the data, and obviously we have the same goal of 0 fatalities. So that's what we suggest. Yes, we also have region numbers that we track as well, which George Snow has data on that.
Is George presenting today, Brian, or?
Yes, we do have data. So yes.
All right, go ahead, George, before I call for motion.
Say again?
George, are you presenting numbers? Are you going to present
Yes,
numbers now?
yeah.
Or? Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, here I'm looking at just the data for our region. But what I did was I reproduced the statewide graphs that Chris just discussed, and I overlaid our data on top of that. For fatals, our average share of the state total is 4.3%. Historically, as depicted on the graph, our crash rate exceeds the state crash rate. And through the 16 through 25 5-year period, it pretty much matched the state's downward trend, but at the higher rate. Beginning with the 17 through 21 5-year period, both the states and our crash rate trended upward. However, our rate has grown at a much higher rate than the states and has resulted in our rate to switch from an upward trend, while the state's crash remains on a slightly downward trend because their rate increase isn't as significant. Also, our 18 through 2022 rate has exceeded the 16 through 2020 rate by 14%, while the state's 18 through 22 rate exceeded the 16 through 20 rate by only 9%. So this shows that for our region, we have to do more work basically to get our fatalities down so that we can contribute to the target rate. We have to do quite a bit more work, and we are doing it. And one of the things that we'll be doing is creating our regional safety plan that's underway. We'll be really beginning tomorrow with our consultant, and so we're looking forward to creating this plan to really contribute to the statewide target here. Next slide, please. This is the serious injuries. On average, our share of the state's total is 3.6%. Historically, our crash rate has been below the state rate. And through the 16 through 20 period, it pretty much matched the state's downward trend, but at a lower rate. For the first time, our rate surpassed the state's rate by almost 1% during the 17 through 21 period. During the 18 through 22 5-year period, both ours and the states trended upward. However, our rate has grown at a much higher rate than the states, and has resulted in our trend beginning to flatten, while the states remains on a downward trend because their rate increase has not been as significant. Our 18 to 22 rate has exceeded the 17 through 21 rate by 11%, while the state's rate during that time period only went up 3%. So again, this shows that we have to do some work to contribute to the state's target to reduce serious injuries. Next. Finally, we have the combined non-motorist mode fatalities and serious injuries. On average, our share of the state total is 2.3%. We average about 12 of these types of serious injuries and fatalities each year. And although there was, as Chris mentioned, there's not a crash rate for this MPM, we are working again to reduce this in our region. although it's not a major issue in our region, but we are in our plan that we're putting together, we will be working on this as well to meet the state's target as well. And that's about all I have.
All right, any questions for George? All right, as Brian mentioned earlier, staff is suggesting, recommending adopting the statewide target. So can I get a motion, a second to do that?
I make a motion to accept it as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second Ann Sullivan.
Any questions? All right, Brian, you want to read the roll, please?
Stephen Wolfle, Mass DOT.
Yes.
Ann Sullivan, Mass DOT Highway.
Yes.
Mark Pamarini, Leominster.
Yes.
Glenn Eaton, MRPC.
Yes.
George Kahali, Mark.
Yes.
Brian Croto, Subregion 1.
Yes.
Rosemary Meisner, Subregion 2.
Yes.
And it's Tim Kilhart, Subregion 3.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, George. We'll move on to the next agenda, item, which I believe are updates, and the first one from Highway Districts 2 and 3. So why don't we go District 3?
Okay. Leominster, project number 604499. Leominster rehab on Route 12, including a culvert, or actually it's a BRI. That is at 75%. The 100% are due March 1st. Right-of-way plans have been accepted for that project. We have a bridge, 608189 Fitchburg, Water Street over Boulder Street, and Pan Am Railroad and Water Street over the North Nashua River. That project is at 100%. The PSNE is due in early April. Right-of-way plans have been accepted. The CE has been approved, and the 401 and 404 environmental permits have been filed. The Fitchburg Ashby Route 31 project, that's the project that we just pulled off of the tip for readiness. That it's at a pre-25% design stage. And then Fitchburg Leominster Twin City Rail Trail construction phase 2. That's project 609411. That project is at 100%. The PSNE is due at the end of January. The Chapter 91 is environmental permit has been filed. The CE and Water Wetlands Protection Act permitting has been drafted. That's it for 2024.
All right, anyone have any questions for Ann? All right, thank you, Ann. Daryl, you up? You here?
Athol intersection of Crescent Street. Completed December 12th. Next milestone, yesterday, is due on February 28th, 24. Next, we have project 613167. This is Athol, Phillipston, Templeton, Bridge Preservation and Bridge Crossing along Route 2. This was advertised on December 30th last year. The next milestone, the bid opening, is on February 21st this year. Next, we have an FY 2A Main Street over the B&M Railroad. Design is at pre-25. Preliminary structures report comments were completed on December 1st. Next milestone is 25% design due on June 19th, 24. And in FY26, we have 608424, Templeton reconstruction of Route 68, built trail 202 to the Phillipston town line. Design is at 75%, and we're awaiting an update on that. The 100% design submission is due August 25th this year. That's all I have.
All right, any questions for Daryl? All right, seeing none, thank you, Daryl. The next update's from Mark. George, you got anything?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of them. MART is working on electrification of its fleet. The Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection recently awarded MART with around $2.5 million from the Volkswagen settlement funds to purchase 330-footer electric buses and charging units over the next 12-18 months, which will allow MART to retire 3 2017 diesel buses. Also, MART is working on a community connection grant that was recently received. This grant will provide ride services to transit-dependent residents of Bolton, Boxborough, Stowe, and Littleton. This service will provide access to commuter rail service at the South Acton and Littleton station. Also shopping opportunities and healthcare appointments for these dependent residents in these communities. This is what I have. Thank you.
Thanks, George. Anyone have any questions? All right, seeing none, do we have any updates from the JTC, Brian?
Yep, just a few. So JTC met last week. We discussed TIP and UPWP development, just like we did today. Next meeting's February 14th at 2:30 remotely, and they'll review the TIP amendments that we released for public comment, along with any comments, and continue to review the TIP projects and UPWP as well, to provide feedback for the MPO. There's two handouts today. The first is from the Division of Ecological Restoration. Some more information on their culvert replacement municipal assistance grant and training sites program. They're accepting project inquiry calls until tomorrow, January 18th, and the request for a response is anticipated to launch in early February, and applications anticipated to be due early March. Also, they provide some information on hiring. They're looking for ecological restorations grant manager, so the information is available on the handout. We also have a handout that was given to us by the Health Foundation of Central Massachusetts. They've asked that we provide information on a grant opportunity. This is the activation funds. This supports discrete one-year projects in Central Massachusetts aimed at helping organizations advance to the next level of capacity and effectiveness that can be sustained over time. So those interested in applying to the activation fund can visit the foundation website, information on the handout. And that is all I have.
Any questions for Brian? All right, last update is from the Regional Planning Commission. Glenn, you got anything?
Yes, very quickly, Mr. Chairman, thank you. 2 points in my memo. One basically welcomes Brian to the meeting as his first MPO as our new Transportation Projects Director. And on that note, we'll be posting position internally according to our policies for 2 weeks starting Monday, and then go externally if no one applies internally. The other point is that every time I'm in a room with local officials, I do like to point out grant opportunities that are available to them. And in my memo, it talks this month about the Commonwealth One Stop Grants Program. I will close by saying that I was in a meeting with a town administrator last week, and he had no idea that of the 13 programs available under One Stop, that his community was eligible for somewhere between 3 and 5. So if there's a local official in the room, please pass this information along about the One Stop program. It's Googleable. You can look it up very quickly, and please consider great planning and brick and mortar programs that are available to our local communities from the Commonwealth. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman.
All right, any questions for Glenn? Thank you, Glenn. We're on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 10. Brian, the next meeting of the MPO will be February 21st, correct?
Yep, and we'll be looking for endorsement of the amendments we discussed today. So quorum is needed for that as well.
All right. I think with that, we're on agenda item 11. Can I get a motion and a second to adjourn, please?
So moved. Ann Sullivan.
Second,
Seconded, Brian Croto.
All right. All in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Take care.
All right, everybody. We will see you next month. Be safe. Stay warm. Brian, good job today. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.